Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some of us can feel our emotions so deeply, while others seem to ride a more even keel? And what if your early experiences with your parents have a huge say in how you understand your feelings right now? Well, today we're diving into some fascinating research that explores exactly that. How our very first relationships shape our ability to understand our own emotions, especially when things get tough. This study asks a big question. Does how we felt emotionally as a kid, especially with our parents, change how clearly we can tell our emotions apart right now? And does this get tricky when we're facing tough feelings or in different social situations? The scientists were curious about emotion differentiation, which is basically your skill at noticing and naming the specific feelings you are experiencing. Think about it like this. Instead of just saying, I feel bad, you can pinpoint if you are feeling sad, angry, anxious, or lonely. This ability is super important for our mental health. The researchers believe that how well we can do this isn't set in stone. It develops over time, and a big part of that development comes from our early experiences with caregivers. Now, imagine growing up with some really tough stuff happening with your parents, like neglect or abuse. The study wanted to see if these early challenges, what they call caregiving, related early adversities or CREs, might mess with how we understand our emotions later on, especially how those emotions change depending on who we're with or what is happening around us. So, they gathered a group of adolescents aged 10 to 17. Some of them had experienced these early caregiving difficulties, and some hadn't. They used something called ecological momentary assessment, or EMA. Think of it like this. For a whole week, these teens got text messages on their phones about 4 to 5 times a day. Each time, they had to quickly answer surveys about how they were feeling right then and what was going on around them. They asked the teens to rate 12 different emotions like happy, sad, stressed, or mad. On a scale, they also asked them about their social context. Were they with parents, friends, other family, or alone? The key thing was to look at how their emotion ratings change from moment to moment, and if these changes were different when they were interacting with parents compared to other social situations, or when they were alone. They were particularly interested in how early adversity might change these patterns. Now, the study looked at two main ways to measure emotion differentiation in the moment. One is called momentary emotion differentiation, or MED, and the other is momentary emotion standard deviation, or MESD. The MED basically tells us how much your emotions are all moving in the same direction compared to your usual emotional patterns. If all your emotions tend to spike or dip together, your MED might be lower, meaning less differentiation. The MESD, on the other hand, looks at how spread out your different emotion ratings are from each other at a single point in time. This helps to see if certain emotions are felt much more strongly than others at that moment. So, what did they find? It is pretty interesting. At a general trait level, meaning over the whole week, looking at their overall tendencies, there weren't really any big differences in emotion differentiation between the teens who had experienced early adversity and those who hadn't. This suggests that maybe the impact isn't about a fixed trait, but more about how emotions play out in real time. But when they looked at the moment-to-moment data, things got more complex. For the adolescents without a history of early adverse caregiving experiences, they found that when they reported negative events involving their parents, their negative emotion differentiation actually went down. This means their negative emotions tended to become more similar and less distinct from each other in that specific moment. This might sound counterintuitive, right? You'd think difficult parent interactions would make you more aware of your feelings. But the researchers think this lower differentiation, or MED combined with a higher MESTID, meaning individual emotions, were felt more intensely and distinctly suggests that when teens without early adversity have negative interactions with parents, they might experience a stronger reaction with a few specific negative emotions, spiking much more than usual. It is like their emotions get more intense, but also more distinct in that moment, leading to this pattern. A parent context seems to have a powerful effect on how they differentiate their negative emotion. Here is the big reveal, though. For the adolescents with a history of caregiving-related early adversities, this pattern completely disappeared. When they interacted with their parents negatively, their emotion differentiation didn't change in the same way. The special boost in MESD and the dip in MED that happened for the other group just wasn't there. The study suggests that early disruptions in caregiving might make individuals less sensitive to the nuances of parental emotional influence in adolescence. It is like the foundational relationship with parents, when disrupted early on, affects how those relationships can shape emotional experiences later, even in everyday moments. They theorize that perhaps early adversity leads to a sort of habituation or a different developmental pathway in how the brain processes parental cues related to emotions. The researchers also touched on the role of anxiety and depression. They found that for adolescents without early adversity, higher anxiety and depression symptoms were linked to more sensitivity to parental contexts, meaning their emotion differentiation changed more. For those with early adversity, higher anxiety and depression were linked to more sensitivity, but towards non-parental social contexts. This is a complex finding, suggesting that while sensitivity to social cues is important, the source of that sensitivity shifts depending on early experiences. Now, what does this all mean? The core takeaway is that our earliest relationships, especially with parents, seem to lay down a blueprint for how we experience and differentiate emotions in adolescence, especially in response to social cues. For those who had stable early caregiving, parental interactions, even negative ones, seem to finely tune their momentary emotional landscape. But for those who experience severe early adversity, this fine-tuning seems to be disrupted, making them less responsive to parental emotional contexts. It is important to acknowledge that this study has limitations. The sample size, while decent for this type of research, is still not massive, and they had to group some social contexts together like friends and other adults into a single category, because there weren't enough specific examples. Future research could break these down further. Also, they relied on self-reports, which can sometimes be subjective. What this research really highlights is the lasting impact of early social environments on our emotional lives. It suggests that interventions aimed at improving emotional differentiation and regulation in adolescents might need to consider the individual's early caregiving history very carefully for those with a history of trauma. The path to understanding and managing emotions might require different approaches than for those who had more stable early childhoods. It also opens up the door to exploring how these moment-to-moment emotional dynamics, influenced by our history, ultimately contribute to our overall psychological well-being. This is such a powerful reminder that our past doesn't just disappear, it shapes how we experience the present, especially our most intimate relationships and our inner emotional lives. What do you think about these findings? Does your own experience align with what the research suggests? Let us know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching RUBIN'S Mind Lab, and I'll see you in the next video.